All right, I think we should start. So I'm just going to introduce everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar. For those who don't know about us, Aplastic Anemia and Myelodysplasia Association of Canada is a non-profit organization that provides a support network and funds research for Canadian patients, family members, friends, and concerned healthcare providers dealing with aplastic anemia, MDS, and PNH. It is guided by dedicated volunteer members of the board of directors and a distinguished team of medical advisors from across Canada. Before we start, I would just like to run through some housekeeping items. When you joined, you will know that you were automatically put into mute. This is to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can hear the presentation. You can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. Please remember, we are recording the webinar, and the recording will be put on our website either later today or tomorrow. With that, I'd now like to introduce you to Patricia Williams.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Robin.
So over to you, Patricia.
Over to me. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said, see, here's the moment I need some compassion. It's already begun. I didn't hear. So welcome, everyone. And thank you, Robin. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you, each one of you who have decided to make your way here today. I really appreciate that. I want to acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people here on Vancouver Island in Victoria. And that's the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich. And that I invite you as well, if there's the territory that you're on, if you want to just silently acknowledge that. I also wanted to, just before we begin, just acknowledge the state of things in the world, because it impacts everything we do. So we're still under this sort of global stress on lots of points. I won't go into it, but you know that. But just holding that as well, that the good work you're doing and the caretaking roles that you have taken on are happening in a stressed world. Okay, so all the more reason to be here today, to show up and learn what we can about compassion for others and self-compassion. So thank you again. And I am a trained teacher of self-compassion, mindful self-compassion. I'm an artist, I'm an art therapist, and I teach art therapy as well as art therapy and self-compassion in a model that I created. So why focus on self-compassion? No, how about first I tell you what I thought we'd talk about here. So we'll talk briefly about what it is, what the research shows. So I really want you to understand that this mindful self-compassion practices are backed by a decade, more than a decade now of research. What happens in the body, the physiology of it, and then if I seem to be rushing through the presentation part, which I'm going to try not to, but if I do, please know it's because I want to have the opportunity to share at least one of these practices, and maybe both, that you can use in the moment when you're in a caretaking situation and you're feeling stressed. And then if there's time, we'll do the summary, and if not, we'll move straight into the question and answers. Okay. For some reason, my slides are not wanting to. Why would they not? Okay. That's strange. Okay. What is mindful self-compassion? The point here is I'm going to give you some definitions, but what we want to do is move from an idea of what it is into the embodied experience, okay? And first and foremost, I want to talk about the problem with self-care, because it's not the same as self-compassion. So self-care is important, don't get me wrong, very extremely important. Eating well, exercise, having your social needs met, vacations, pedicures, you name it, all extremely important. But self-care happens outside of providing care, okay? Not in the situation. You can't say to someone you're with, whoa, this is getting to be too much. I got to go get a massage, right? You can't do that. You can't do self-care whilst caring directly for someone else, but you can offer self-compassion, and that impacts the other person, the person you're caring for. So that's the big advantage of self-compassion, best in combination, of course, with self-care. So lots of research, and it consistently shows some things. If we're compassionate toward ourselves, we're less likely to be depressed, anxious, stressed, etc. And we're more likely to be happier, to be resilient, to have optimism. So essentially, better mental health. Mindful self-compassion is a number of things. When you hear that term, you should know it refers to a number of things. And one of the things it's talking about is an actual 8-week program. And it's 3 hours a week for 8 weeks, plus a retreat, plus, as you can see, home-based practice. In session, you're doing experiential practices and meditations. So it's an intensive training. But I'm also going to reference a short one that's just 6 weeks, 1 hour, that they did for healthcare folks, people just like yourselves, and doctors and nurses. And they were pretty shocked to find that even a small amount of self-compassion practice had big results. Okay, so the research on the big program, the 8-week one, showed a lot of positive outcomes. These are the objectives of it, and the research shows that the objectives are met. So less self-criticism and lower, as I said, anxiety, depression, and then shame, really powerful and toxic feeling that can really hinder our sense of well-being. And it can make its way into these caregiving relationships too, like, I'm not doing a good enough job. What's wrong with me? Okay, so dealing with shame as in a direct way is a powerful aspect of self-compassion. We learn to regulate our emotions more readily, and we motivate ourselves with kindness. This is it's not the boot camp approach, right? And it really helps with challenging relationships. And the one I put in bold there is reduces the risk of compassion, fatigue, and burnout. And that's a big focus for today's talk. We don't want anyone burning out. It's a long way back when that happens. And so we want to cultivate these inner resources. So that's the other thing we're referencing when we say self-compassion, mindful self-compassion. It's this inner well of resiliency that we're cultivating when we do these practices. And we're going to do a couple of them today. So we're learning to notice when we're struggling and to give ourselves compassion. So the thing that really struck me when I did this training, pardon me, was this is not the fair weather friend. This is the friend that's there when you're in the trenches, when you're really suffering, okay, struggling, whatever word you like. So, oh my goodness, I forgot to warn you that was coming. Okay, so what happens when you see that little one? What sound might you make if you saw an infant in this kind of distress? What are you thinking? What would you want to do? Okay, so just think about that for a minute. Generally, people go, oh, and they want to ease the suffering of that little one. And that sound of awe, that's a universal sound for compassion. I think I'm talking a little fast. I'll try and slow it down slightly. So when we have compassion for others, we notice their suffering. The first thing you did was notice that baby. Then we suffer with them, okay? We feel a bit of their pain, sometimes a lot. And when we're coming from a place of compassion, we're offering kindness, understanding, okay? Maybe they failed or done something wrong. We're not coming at them with judgment, whatever it is, even if it's something they shouldn't have done. We notice the suffering, we suffer with them and offer kindness, and then we recognize that this is our shared humanity, that suffering, failure, shortcomings, imperfection, this is shared by every human being. Okay, it's not like the movies. There's no perfect people. And so, of course, self-compassion, as I'm sure you were guessing, acting the same way you do to others when you're the one falling short. Okay, when you notice something you don't like about yourself, maybe some way that you're being in the caring relationship. And rather than ignoring it, when you're being compassionate to yourself, okay, just like we had to notice the other person, in that little baby in pain, we have to see it and say, this is hard, okay? And then we have to look for ways to comfort and care for ourselves. And you can do it while with another human being, okay? It's got this portability. So these are the three elements. Probably no real surprises there. There's a warmth when you're offering kindness to yourself. It's got this sense of warmth. Okay, that's one of the elements that is necessary, a component of self-compassion. There's this sense of our common humanity, this knowing that throughout all ages and all time, as human beings, we've suffered. Okay. And then this mindfulness, when it's used in this context, means awareness. What's happening? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And accepting it, okay? Accepting what is. I'm feeling angry right now, even though I'm supposed to be a nice, caretaking person. I'm feeling angry. Okay, I'm aware of it. I know I'm not alone. And I'm going to bring this element of kindness. So I forgot to tell you, but each one of these beautiful, positive components of compassion has the dark side. And you might have guessed the dark side of being kind to ourselves in a time of struggle is the critical voice. Okay. And it's sometimes called self-judgment. And we all know that voice, I'm sure. Some of us a harsher inner critic than others. So what we're aiming to do is recognize as well when that critic is at work and turn again toward the kindness. And we're going to give you some tools to do that. So we're not ignoring what's going on, and we're not beating ourselves up for it. All right. So the point here is people can't always be how they want to be. They can't always get what they want. And when we push back against that, we actually suffer more. Okay, because we feel stress, we feel frustration with ourselves or with life. So, but the reality is life is the way it is, and it's not always what we hoped we'd get or what we think we should have. And when we can turn toward that difficult situation we find ourselves in with kindness and, you know, sympathy and sort of more equanimity, that acceptance, we ironically or paradoxically, we become better suited, better able to deal with the issue at hand. Now, again, the positive aspect of understanding our common humanity, we're all in this together. It has this weird dark side, and that is it's not rational, but we do it where we feel lonely when things are going wrong for us, when we feel we've let ourselves down or others. There's this frustration, but there's also this sense of loneliness. Why me? Why is this happening? What's wrong with me? As if, it's as if we think we're the only person that's having this particular frustration or pain. But of course, being a human means we're mortal, we're vulnerable, and we're imperfect. I remember when my teacher, Chris Germer, said, I'm not okay. You're not okay, but it's okay. So this understanding of our common humanity, and sometimes with a bit of humor, reduces that sense of loneliness. And then the third, the mindfulness that we keep talking about here, the dark side of that, or the flip side, is when we're over-identifying with our emotions. We are overwhelmed by them, or there's this process where sometimes we're feeling angry, we'll say, or deeply sad, and then there's this question, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling that way? And we come to feel bad about ourselves instead of just having that uncomfortable feeling, right? So that's one way. We over-identify with it, exaggerate it, or we just avoid it. We just stiff upper lip. We don't attend to it at all. And the mindful, that compassionate aspect the mindful aspect of compassion says, I can be present in an open-minded and balanced, non-judging way. Yup, this really big, awful feeling is sitting in the middle of my chest. Okay, that's how it is in this moment. Okay, but we're not flooded or thrown off course, or we're willing to look at what's present. And then I wanted to include this one because lots of times, I'm not sure about you folks, I wish we were sitting in a room and I could see you and we could talk right now about what comes to mind when you hear the term self-compassion. And usually people are thinking about the yin, okay? The comforting, the soothing, the validating, the soft side, and that's very valid. But there's this yang side, this acting in the world, where we may have to protect ourselves or someone else. We have to stand up for things. We have to provide. We have to motivate ourselves when things are really hard. So the yin you can think of sort of as nourishing, the yang as courage and strength. But we need both, because we've got to be nourished before we can go out into the world or into that caregiving situation with the courage and strength that we may need to set boundaries, to get resources, whatever that is. And it can be helpful to sort of think of yourself as having a strong back, but a soft front. Okay, we're keeping our heart open, but we've got that courageous, strong back. So just that first part, which I kind of whizzed through there, self-compassion, to summarize, is kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And I really like to think of it as being in this state of loving, connected presence. Okay, loving is the kindness. Okay, connected, that common humanity, and presence is mindfulness. Being present without judgment to what's happening within ourselves, even when it's not pretty, and mindful of what's happening with those around us and in the environment. So those are the three components. We looked at the dark side of them. I'd ask you now just to think about a good friend of yours, maybe not the person that you're directly caring for, or not your child or partner, that can be a little too close, but just try to think of a good friend and imagine that they're really struggling. They've either, had some big misfortune, or they've failed at something, or they feel inadequate. Just sort of bring that to mind. This is someone you really care about, but they're really struggling. What would you say? What would you say to them? What would your posture be? Like nonverbal gestures. Just let that come to mind. The tone of your voice, maybe. And then shift gears and imagine it's you. You've just had a misfortune or a failure of some kind, or you're feeling overwhelmed with inadequacy. How do you typically respond to yourself? What's your tone when you're talking to yourself? Are there any sort of gestures that you might offer yourself? And is there a difference? Typically there is. Okay, you don't have to confess here today, but typically, and research in the US, I don't have Canadian stats for this, but we can guess, we might be similar. 78% of people are more compassionate to other people. Right? Almost 80% of the people find it easier to offer compassion to others. There's only 6% who are more compassionate to themselves. I've never met one of them, but 6%. And 16%, the remaining folks, are kind of balanced, equally self-compassionate and compassionate to others. So if you found that you weren't as compassionate to yourself when you imagined yourself suffering as you would be to a friend, you are by no means alone. And so we want at all costs to prevent burnout and to build resilience. That's what you want to be doing. And in the research that's gone on now for way over a decade, there's a scale, a little self-compassion test, and you can go online on Kristen Neff's website and do it. It's a short little test, and it shows in the research, so thousands and thousands of people, if those scores are really low, you tend to have more challenges in sort of mental health, psychological well-being, stress, anxiety, depression, all those kinds of things. And as self-compassion grows, that mental health and well-being tends to grow. The other piece is that compassion is also linked to better physical health. It's interesting. It's not just a feel-good ideas kind of thing. It actually leads to better immune function because it increases the parasympathetic system. So that's the soothing one, okay? And it brings down the sympathetic, the fight, flight, freeze. So we get this this kind of soothing effect on the physiology of the body, which allows it to function better. But you also get better health outcomes when you increase your self-compassion, because you're motivating yourself by kindness, not beating yourself up because you're having yet another cheeseburger, right? We come from this place of what can I do that's good for me? And that might mean I'm going to take a 10-minute break and walk around the block. So when we're acting from a place of compassion, we're getting better physical health outcomes for all those reasons. Okay, so I think I've said all of this already. Reduced anxiety and depression, better just overall quality of life and well-being, life satisfaction, and better relationships, more social engagement, social connection. We also manage the aging process better. I don't know the age of you folks, but often when we're caring for people, either our own aging process is unfolding in a way that's significant, or the one we're caring for. So just to know there's a whole range of reasons that self-compassion helps us navigate aging in a more healthy and comfortable way. Helps with relationships, improves our sense of self, does lots for body image, self-worth, the healthy lifestyle I've mentioned, and then reducing burnout. And burnout is sort of this equation of too much ongoing stress, emotionally intense work, and not enough resources, okay, either inner or external. And the way that self-compassion works is these aspects we've talked about, the mindfulness, being compassionate to others, helps. But then the next 2 points there, compassion, satisfaction, and feelings of personal accomplishment, so important. So let's skip down to the bottom, and then I'll come back to that, what that actually means. So we're bringing down stress, depression, and the other thing that comes down is this sense of emotional exhaustion, and then depersonalization. And what that means is it becomes too painful to be empathizing endlessly with the pain of another. So it's a natural human, whether that's emotional or physical pain, sorrow, struggle. So it's a natural response. We want to pull away. This is part of our survival mechanism has us detach a bit from the person we're caring for. And so it's understandable. And MS, self-compassion, also helps us be less likely to suffer traumatic stress, secondary traumatic stress. They're experiencing some traumatic aspect of their illness, and then we can also do that. So back up to how self-compassion helps. We move out of that just sort of vibrating, resonating in empathy for their pain into a different part of the brain lights up when we're compassionate versus empathic. And we start to feel good about the work we're doing. Even though it's hard, even though all the problems are still there, we cultivate this sense of, I'm doing a good job. This is a meaningful, important thing that I'm doing. And that is this enormous buffer against having to detach emotionally from the person we're caring for. Okay. It prevents that emotional exhaustion, because we're kind of filling up with, yeah, it's hard, but I'm doing something very, very important, something I can feel really good about. So I'm sure you know this, but we need to be reminded of this all the time. For someone to develop genuine compassion towards others, first, he or she must have a basis upon which to cultivate compassion. And that basis is the ability to connect to one's own feelings and to care for one's own welfare. Caring for others requires caring for oneself. So again, so easy to say, Mr. Dalai Lama, harder to do. But we know that from the research, we know from wisdom of humankind from the beginning of time, that we must take care of the self in order to sustainably care for other people. So I won't spend much time here. This is the short program. A lot of the research was done on the 8-week, 3 hours, a retreat. This came up because doctors and nurses and caregivers said, I don't have time. I cannot do that much. I can't find that much time. So they kind of put this really abbreviated version into a kind of 1 hour lunch at the hospital training. It's been expanded to 90 minutes, depending on the availability of time. But what happened, they got very similar results. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is it's very exciting to know that even small amounts of compassion and self-compassion practice can have very similar results as the big training, the big program. With this additional layer of reducing what we call empathy fatigue rather than compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is used a lot, but when you're truly operating from compassion, you're less likely to get fatigued. What happens is when we're just in empathy and our mirror neurons are firing away with feeling the pain of the other, right? That's how they work. We see someone struggling, the neurons in our brain light up so that we can feel what they're feeling. But if that's all that's happening, we wear out, we become fatigued from it. It's just too much. We can't keep feeling that, and we burn out or head that direction. So we learn how to shift from compassion or from empathy, which fatigues us over if that's all that's happening, into compassion. Yeah, this is just, it's all the same stuff. I'm going to skip over this. This was the program, Caring for Others Without Losing Yourself, offered to healthcare professionals. Same significant results. Okay. So, and this is about compassion satisfaction. So we want to find ways to deepen our sense of satisfaction. Okay. And one of the ways, satisfaction with our job, one of the ways we do that is we cultivate our own self-compassion. Why? Because it boosts our capacity to be compassionate toward others. And that allows us to have more of a sense of accomplishment. Okay. I hope I'm, kind of completing that circle for you so it makes sense to you. Because who burns out often are the most loving and giving people. So that's why it sounds like I'm trying to sell you a car. It's like, I know you must be those kind of people. And so we want to understand the value of self-compassion, of course, for ourselves, but also because it gives us more to offer those we're caring for. And burnout's prevalent. So we want to know, okay, what's this self-compassion thing about? Because it helps buffer. Okay. I've just talked about this. This is the difference between empathy and compassion. And I think I've covered all these points. But empathic distress, we're feeling with the other person. And compassion is just a slight step back. It's no less caring, but we're feeling for them. Okay. And our feelings are not so much the stress as it is love, the desire to help. And we don't feel that need to withdraw. We find even when it's really difficult, we've kind of armed ourselves in a way, that strong back, the soft heart, open heart, that we can stay with those difficulties. And what we also know is that we can learn this stuff. I'm watching our time because I want to get us to the practices. We know that a few weeks of loving kindness meditation, which is one of the ways of training in compassion, actually, of course, makes us feel happier, increases resilience, but it also is part of that buffering. So we have more compassion to give and we're less vulnerable to burning out. We can tolerate more distress. But that's the good news. We can learn to be that way. We can learn to offer compassion in a way that doesn't deplete us. So this is the little summary thing. We've got to know, am I just resonating in empathic distress and I'm not going to be able to sustain it? Or can I pause, offer myself some self-compassion for how difficult it is, and slowly build a sense of satisfaction in the work I'm doing? And we're going to do this self-compassion practice shortly. The third part is, what do I need right now? And part of what you learn is that when you just give yourself a few seconds, 10 seconds to ponder, okay, this is so hard right now. What do I need? How can I be kind to myself? You learn to hear surprising answers. It might be, I need a manicure, but it might be something like, I need to sit down and take off my shoes and just take 5 deep breaths. Okay. So we learn to listen to that little inner voice that does secretly know what we need. And it can be a surprising answer. It can be learned. So the physiology of self-compassion, I'm going to sort of skip over this and just say briefly that it's not just a body, it's not just a thing in the mind, this business of self-compassion. We activate the mammalian caregiving system. Okay, it's a system in the body. And when we activate it with these few simple things we're going to do, oxytocin is released. And that's that, or love hormone, it's sometimes called, but it has profound benefits on our health. So the opposite of self-compassion, as you know, is self-criticism. And when self-criticism happens in the body, the brain doesn't distinguish between an external threat and an internal one. So those harsh words of the inner critic set off a cascade. The amygdala gets triggered, and there's this cascade of physiological things that happen: cortisol, adrenaline, blood pressure goes up. And that's okay for a short burst of energy to avert danger. But in chronically stressful situations where that that inner critic is threatening us, the body wears down. The body shows signs of that fatigue from the negative emotions, right? The hormones associated with that. They're fine in short bursts, but cortisol and adrenaline are never meant to be running through your body 24/7. So the physiology of self-compassion releases oxytocin, and that sets off that parasympathetic system in the body that I talked about, brings the blood pressure down, reverses the impact of the adrenaline and the cortisol. So we're getting this calming of the cardiovascular system. So we want to harness that physiology, right? We want to be able to activate that caregiving system, soothe those painful thoughts. So I think what I'd like to do is take a little break now from the screen. So I'm going to stop sharing here. There we go. And walk us through the self-compassion break. So I guess we don't see the other folks on the screen, and that's okay. That's fine. But I'll lead us through what's called the self-compassion break, and I hope the other exercise, and then we'll dive into the questions. If that sounds, unless there's something you felt that any questions that should be asked before, or.
I can't see any questions in the Q&A. So.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I'll just invite you to either close your eyes or let the eyes take a soft gaze down for this. And it's something that you can do anytime you need a little bit of self-compassion. But just to know that when we offer kindness to ourselves, sometimes difficult feelings come up. So you might get a little upsurge of emotion that can happen. And as long as you can manage it, that's okay. But if you have to open your eyes, feel free to do that. It's not that self-compassion creates those uncomfortable feelings. It's that suddenly we remember that we haven't been kind to ourselves very much, or we realize what we haven't received when we're struggling. Okay, so we're just going to go over those 3 components of self-compassion. And I'll give you some phrases to use. The 3 of them will be, this is a moment of suffering, I'm not alone, and what do I need right now? But I'll invite you to put in your own words, okay? I'll pause as we go through this, and you can use words that feel right to you for those 3 separate components. Okay, so getting a comfortable position with eyes closed or just softly gazing in front of you. And in order to practice self-compassion, we have to summon a little bit of suffering, okay? So something in your life that's difficult right now, but keep it small to medium, okay? When we're learning to do this, we want to practice with something that won't overwhelm us, okay? So some situation that's really challenging you right now, and just tuning in just for a minute, we want you to feel this sort of the discomfort that goes along with this. What happened, or what do you think is going to happen? Really bring this difficult situation to mind. And it might be your inner critic. It might be that, harsh or judgmental voice of the inner critic, or it might be with someone else. I'll just give you a minute to think of something and really bring it to mind enough that it kind of, you feel it. Okay, so now I'm going to be saying those 3 phrases, and that will help us tune back into the 3 components of self-compassion when we need it, okay? So the first, this is a moment of suffering, okay? We're just bringing mindful awareness to the fact that suffering or struggle, whatever you want to call it, is present, okay? So whatever language speaks to you, maybe this is a moment of suffering works for you, or maybe this is really hard. This is really hard, or I'm really struggling. All right. So just turning toward the difficulty, acknowledging it, and naming it. This is a moment of suffering. Or whatever words work for you. And the second phrase, suffering is a part of life. Okay, suffering is a part of life. So we're just coming back to that concept of our common humanity. Suffering is a part of life. And maybe you say something to yourself like, it's not abnormal to feel this way. Okay? Many, many, many people are going through similar situations. The degree of suffering may be different, the flavor might be different, but suffering, struggle is a part of our human existence. Okay, so just tuning in to that sense of common humanity, that you are not alone, whatever the painful situation or thought, feeling, whatever it is, you are not alone. And the third phrase, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And, you might want to put your hand or one or both hands over your heart. this is one way we activate that caregiving system in the body. So really allowing the sense of pressure, the gentle pressure, the warmth of your hand, or both hands on your heart, maybe one on your belly, wherever feels good to you. Feels soothing and comforting. And we say, may I be kind to myself in this moment. May I be kind. And what do I need? What do I need right now? Just tuning in to that feeling of warmth, imagining care, kindness, compassion streaming through your fingers into your body. What do I need? And here you might recall the phrases you would use with a good friend, okay? You know, I'm here for you, sort of referring to ourselves as we would a good friend. I'm here for you. I got your back. It's going to be okay. I care about you. And for some of us, using a diminutive like sweetheart or darling or whatever, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. This is so hard. But I got you. Okay, I'm here. Whatever feels natural to you. Okay? It's kind of this deep wish that you be free from suffering, that you be happy, well. And just tuning back into the warmth of your hands. And then letting the hands rest. And as you're ready, opening your eyes and just noticing, how am I? How does this feel now that I've offered this little bit of kindness? And it may be that you feel better, and it may be that you feel worse, and it may be that you feel the same. Whatever's there, we practice mindfulness, allowing, letting it be. Savoring it if it's something good, offering more kindness if it's somehow difficult. Okay. Just noticing, allowing, accepting, just exactly as you are in this moment. And that little break that we just did is called the self-compassion break. And it can be done anywhere. We took a little longer practicing it now, but if you go on to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion or Kristen Neff's website, you can find it and listen to it and practice it. But you'll get so good that all you have to do is put your hand on your heart and go, this is a moment of suffering. I'm not alone. What do I need right now? What do I need? How can I be kind in this moment? And you can literally do it while you're in the midst of a difficult encounter with another person, you know? And I know that because I've done it. I was following the ambulance with my daughter in the ambulance, and I had one hand on my heart and one on the steering wheel. And I'm like, okay, you know, you have to drive, you have to pay attention. But I literally was a safer driver by virtue of doing the self-compassion break. I've done it thousands of times. So I just want you to know I'm speaking from a lot of practice. So I'm noticing the time. I do have another practice, but I just wonder, can we hear from the folks that are, I know there's just a couple of folks. Is there, if you had any questions or any?
I can't see anything yet. I will say I was doing it as well, and I found when you try and give yourself the compassion saying, I found that really strange. Like it was, you know, in the way that you would put an arm around a friend, it was like, oh no, this is really weird, and it felt very, very strange. It felt quite hard to
Yeah.
get myself to say, you know what, it's okay. I did
Yeah.
find it hard.
Yeah. And that's a common feeling. We're not accustomed to offering self-kindness,
No.
you know? And so what we can do in that case, you know, when it's like, oh, this is really hard right now, is offer compassion for how hard it is to be kind to yourself. So we just kind of step back a little and go, sweetheart, I know you've never been raised to be this way. It's not common to offer, you know, a hug or a hand on heart or whatever. I got it. It's hard. How can you be kind to yourself for how hard it is to be kind to yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And we literally, and it works. We literally just keep backing up until we develop that comfort. And then it just becomes automatic.
Okay.
But thank you for sharing that that's hard. 78% of the people find it easier to be kind to someone else, right? We're not raised to be kind to ourselves. It feels awkward. But when you look at the research, it's like, oh, so many benefits, right? So we want to, yeah, again, bring kind of mindfulness to the difficulty. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this. I want to stop now. But bringing mindfulness, oh, there's a big response to that difficulty. Okay, I hear you. I'm with you, right? So it's just these circles of practice. So folks are they're just typing. They're not.
Yeah, there's the option, but I can't see any questions at all. Like when
Okay.
it says no open questions. So
Okay. So maybe what I'll do is just go through the second practice.
okay.
We've got, still got 7 minutes or so. So this one is called Compassion with Equanimity or Compassionate Breathing. And this one is, sorry, I have my big mindful self-compassion binder that weighs about 5 pounds. But it's one as well, like the self-compassion break, that you can do literally while you're with someone, okay? And definitely in the midst of a caregiving situation, especially when you're feeling that empathic distress, where you're just feeling for the other person in a way that feels like too much. You see them, and whether that, again, like I've said, whether that's emotional or physical distress, or just fatigue, you're just tired. So I'll invite you again just to take a comfortable position and pardon me, and eyes closed fully or just gazing down. And you might take just a few deep breaths to settle the body. And often we don't exhale fully. So I would invite you to take a couple of breaths where you take a nice inhale, but you let the exhale be at least as long, okay? Like we're just getting rid of all the stale air from the lungs. And then they naturally fill fully, and then another nice long exhale, and then let the breath find its rhythm, natural rhythm. And again, bringing to mind a situation, but letting that be someone that you are caring for. Okay, if it's too triggering, pick someone a little more removed, but someone where you're feeling a degree of frustration or exhaustion, but they're suffering, okay? They've got some difficulty. And sort of, again, enough, just as with the self-compassion break, that you feel that struggle in your body, okay? Not overwhelming yourself, but, oh yeah, this is hard. And then I'm just going to read a few phrases, and I'll read it twice. So just let them roll through your mind and your heart and your body. Everyone is on their own life journey. I am not the cause of this person's suffering, nor is it entirely possible within my power to make it go away, even though I wish I could. Moments like these can be difficult to bear, yet I may still try to help if I can. So I'll read it again at the end, but now just noting the stress in your own body. Imagine you're drawing, with your next in-breath, you're drawing compassion into your body and filling every cell, entire body with compassion, okay? So this big breath in of compassion, and it's soothing, it's going everywhere in the body. And just as you exhale, letting compassion go out to that person that you brought to mind, okay? So it takes a little bit of practice, but we're inhaling compassion and kindness for yourself, exhaling kindness, compassion for the other. Okay, and just letting your body and your breath find that rhythm. In for me, okay? Compassion in for me, out for you, out for the other person. Okay? Just do that for another minute or so. Letting it fill the whole body. And then this warm wave of compassion out to the other. You may notice that the body is caressed on the inhalation, okay? Soothed. And then exhaling. Okay. Just as we prepare to close, you might imagine that you're floating on this ocean of compassion, okay? This ocean that's limitless. Okay? This ocean can hold all suffering, okay? All struggle. And just letting yourself be there as you hear these words one more time. Everyone is on their own life journey. I am not the cause of this person's suffering, nor is it entirely within my power to make it go away, even though I wish I could. Moments like these can be difficult to bear, yet I may still try to help if I can. Okay. And once again, just letting yourself be exactly as you are. Noticing how are you? How am I doing? And then as you're ready, opening your eyes. And just, what did you notice? What was that like to breathe it in for yourself and breathe it out for the other? Or can you imagine doing that in a caregiving situation? Of course, you wouldn't be closing down your eyes unless their eyes were closed too, but just that idea of bringing in what you need and then offering just through your breath compassion. I guess it's just you, Robin. I guess we're not getting, I'm not sure if there's any responses or questions from folks.
No, I can't see anything.
Okay. So I'm watching our time. I realize I won't have a chance to review everything, but those are two that can be used in the moment. That's the difference between a lot of self-care. I'm not sure if you have I think you have the PowerPoint, and it does have a lot of resources. So Kristen Knapp has a website, easy to find. Chris Germer also, they created the program, so very easy to find. And the Mindful Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, lots of resources for folks who might want to deepen into. This was like a little tip of the self-compassion iceberg, right? But lots of opportunity for continuing that learning. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, as I said, there don't seem to be any questions. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I guess we'll say goodbye.
Sure. And then if anyone has questions about those resources or something, please let me know.
Okay.
Or if folks who view the webinar, I'll leave that with you, but certainly they can get a hold of me. I'm happy to provide information.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for asking, and thanks for the good work you do.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.